There comes a moment when life cracks open without warning. Everything you trusted begins to unravel: your identity, your plans, your sense of control. It feels like betrayal, like abandonment, like God has turned his face away. But what if this chaos isn't cruelty? What if it's divine precision? A necessary breaking, not to harm you but to awaken you. Stay with me, because by the end of this message, you'll begin to see your deepest wounds as doorways, not walls. You'll realize the storm wasn't sent to destroy you, it was sent to deliver you. What feels like divine disruption may, in truth, be your sacred reintroduction to your purpose. There is something undeniably unsettling about chaos. It creeps in unexpectedly, sometimes like a whisper, sometimes like a storm, and it leaves in its wake a trail of shattered assumptions and broken frameworks. We often believe that life should progress linearly, cleanly, and logically, moving from one triumph to the next, with each success affirming that we are doing something right. But the soul does not evolve through ease. The soul evolves through contradiction, through pain, through disruption that interrupts the complacent slumber of unconscious living. What we call chaos is, in many cases, the cracking open of the psyche under the weight of a life not fully lived. And it is precisely in this cracking where divine purpose begins its descent. The chaos is not meaningless. On the surface, it appears random, unjust, even cruel, but beneath that surface lies an archetypal truth. Something within us must die for something greater to be born. The personality we constructed layer by layer through social conditioning, parental expectation, religious fear, and personal defense must begin to fragment. Not because we are failing, but because we are finally being invited to become real. When God disrupts your life, it may feel as if everything you trusted is falling apart. But in truth, it is only the false parts, the parts that were never truly you, that are being removed. Divine disruption is a sacred scalpel that cuts through the illusions you mistook for identity. It is not an act of cruelty, but of unbearable mercy. To understand this, one must not view pain as a punishment. Pain, when allowed to speak, is revelatory. It is the body's cry, the psyche's protest, the soul's whisper, all converging in one holy scream. This life is too small for me. And so the chaos begins not as a cruel trick, but as a sacred intervention. You see, purpose does not arrive gently. It does not politely knock. Purpose roars through the chambers of your comfort and tears down every idol that stands between you and your authenticity. The job you thought you needed, the relationship you swore would complete you, the image you cultivated for others, these must often be reduced to rubble before the deeper self. The true self can rise from beneath. But why must there be pain? Why does the divine path seem paved with suffering? This is not because the divine delights in your agony. It is because suffering strips you of that which does not belong to you. The roles you play, the masks you wear, the narratives you inherited, they cling to you until only suffering has the power to make you release them. The soul knows what the mind forgets. Transformation is not always gentle. It is surgical. And all true healing is preceded by exposure. When you are broken open, there is an unveiling. The pain disorients you. Yes, but it also invites you to see the structures you unconsciously built. You begin to realize how much of your life was shaped by fear. Fear of being rejected, so you became agreeable. Fear of being alone, so you stayed in what no longer served you. Fear of failure, so you never fully tried. And then one day, everything breaks. Not because you were wrong, but because your soul was ready to be right. Not in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of the divine. And in that breaking, something ancient begins to stir within you. This is the moment of sacred reckoning. The ego, which once held the reins of your decisions, finds itself disarmed. It cannot fix this. It cannot manipulate its way out. It cannot perform, achieve, or pretend its way to wholeness. And so, it begins to die. And though this death feels like despair, it is the beginning of something holy. The fracturing of the false self is not the end. It is the preparation for the emergence of something infinitely more powerful, your true self. The one untouched by performance, undistorted by fear, unshaken by approval or criticism alike. In Jungian terms, the ego must descend. It must face its shadows, the parts of the self we buried because they were too painful or too shameful to acknowledge. Divine disruption forces us to confront these shadows. And it is only through this confrontation that integration becomes possible. To be whole is not to be perfect. It is to be honest. It is to stop pretending and finally feel. It is to allow the soul to speak truths that the ego spent decades avoiding. And so, through the pain, The soul begins to reclaim its rightful place as guide. This descent into the inner world is terrifying because it requires letting go of control, letting go of certainty, letting go of who we thought we were. But this is the exact movement needed for transformation to occur. The caterpillar does not transform by planning its future. It disintegrates. Inside the cocoon, it becomes unrecognizable even to itself. So must you. You must allow yourself to unravel. You must allow the old self to decompose so the new self, full, real, radiant, can emerge. But this process is rarely understood. In the moment, we cling, we bargain, we try to salvage the structures that once made us feel safe, and this is where the suffering intensifies. For as long as you resist the breaking, you prolong the birth. Chaos becomes unbearable only when you fight it. When you surrender, not in defeat, but in trust, you begin to see that the divine disruption is not here to destroy your life. It is here to reveal the life you were always meant to live. You may ask, how can I trust in the middle of such devastation? And the answer is not found in blind optimism, but in inner listening. If you can sit in the silence long enough, if you can resist the urge to rush toward resolution, you will hear the faint voice of purpose beneath the noise. It is quiet. It is steady. It tells you that everything falling apart is making space for something more real, something lasting, something eternal. This is the voice of your soul, remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And the tragedy is that most people never make it this far. They reconstruct their masks too quickly. They rush back to comfort. They rebuild the very prisons they were just set free from. But if you can stay in the in-between, if you can live in the holy tension between what was and what is yet to come, then something extraordinary begins to happen. The pieces don't fall back into place. They fall into a new design. One you could never have orchestrated on your own. This is what it means to be broken by God. It is not about punishment. It is about purification. The fire is not meant to consume you. It is meant to refine you. Every trial, every disappointment, every tear you shed is a tool in the divine hand, carving away everything that is not essential. And what remains is not a lesser version of you. It is the truest version of you. The one who can walk into the world not from a place of performance, but from a place of profound authenticity and courage. And still, the descent deepens. The soul is not content with surface-level change. It calls you into deeper territory, into the depths of your unconscious mind, where old wounds reside, where unmet needs live, where long-forgotten dreams whisper in the dark. The divine disruption shakes these things loose. It exposes the lies you believed about your worth. It reveals the inner agreements you made to stay small. And once seen, these lies lose their power. What follows is disintegration, not just of identity, but of structure, of belief, of patterns passed down through generations. And yet, it is through this very disintegration that sacred transformation begins. This is what mystics and prophets have described for centuries. The dark night of the soul, the alchemical process, the death before resurrection. The old must die not because it was evil, but because it was incomplete. This process cannot be bypassed. It cannot be intellectually understood or emotionally avoided. It must be lived. You must feel your way through it. You must walk through the fire, not around it. And while it may feel like abandonment, it is actually the most intimate experience of being seen by the divine. God does not break what he does not intend to heal, and he does not heal what he does not first intend to use. The disorientation, the confusion, the loneliness, it is all part of the sacred unraveling. This is not the chaos of a meaningless universe. This is the holy disorder of a loving creator making room for purpose. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. And though you may not yet see the pattern, one day you will look back and realize this was the moment you were set free, not from the world, but from yourself. And that is where the real journey begins. Pain does not arrive in our lives as an enemy. It does not come merely to haunt, to torture, or to shame us. It arrives as a messenger, often misunderstood, feared, or suppressed, it carrying within it the sacred code for our transformation. We spend so much time trying to silence our suffering, to numb it, escape it, distract ourselves with pleasure, work, achievement, or spiritual bypassing. But the truth is that suffering is not a sentence. It is a signal, and it will persist until it is heard. The soul uses discomfort as a divine language. When you are misaligned, when you are drifting away from your essence, when you have betrayed yourself too many times in the name of approval or survival, suffering becomes the vehicle through which truth speaks. There is a temptation to believe that healing means getting rid of all pain. But this notion is a distortion. In reality, healing means learning to listen to what pain has to say. Beneath every ache lies a truth unspoken, a memory unresolved, a need unmet, or a purpose unfulfilled. The deeper question is not how to eliminate pain, but how to become conscious of its message. For those who dare to sit in the fire long enough, there comes an initiation and awakening of the higher self. This awakening is not comfortable, but it is necessary. Because the path to authenticity always passes through the ruins of who we used to be. We begin to see, often only in hindsight, that the very thing which once brought us to our knees was the same thing that forced us to stand. Our heartbreaks teach us where we once gave ourselves away to isolate. Our losses teach us what we had placed too much identity in. Our betrayals revealed the boundaries we failed to set. In this way, suffering is sacred, not because it is pleasant or just, but because it is precise. It cuts through the illusion. It exposes the cracks in our foundation, not to destroy us, but to make room for truth. And what is truth, if not the soul's memory of who it is? In the depths of that confrontation, we stop asking superficial questions. We no longer plead for life to go back to what it was. We begin to ask, what is this trying to make of me? This shift is monumental. It marks the moment the ego relinquishes control, and the soul steps forward as guide. The voice of the victim softens, and in its place rises the voice of the observer, the alchemist, the seeker. Now the pain is not simply endured, is studied, integrated, transformed. It becomes the raw material out of which the future is shaped. And in this shaping, we find ourselves becoming someone new. Or perhaps, someone we were always meant to be. But this becoming does not happen in one glorious moment. It happens in the small choices we make after being broken. The decision to feel instead of numb. The decision to rest instead of run. The decision to confront instead of deny. With each of these choices, the soul remembers its power. And through this remembrance, the higher self emerges not as a fantasy, but as a reality carved by fire. The higher self does not arrive through self-improvement. It arrives through self-remembrance. It is not about adding more knowledge or stacking achievements. It is about peeling back the layers that have obscured your essence. You are not meant to become someone else. You are meant to reclaim who you've always been beneath the masks, beneath the trauma, beneath the roles you were taught to play. The higher self is not something you strive to reach. It is something you sink into. As the ego dissolves and the soul rises, what trials do is accelerate this process. They strip you bare. They remove all the distractions that once allowed you to avoid your inner world. Suddenly, the noise fades. The approval of others loses its hold. The ambitions that once drove you no longer satisfy, and you are left face to face with yourself. It is in this solitude, in this silence, that the voice of the higher self becomes audible. It speaks not in loud commands, but in gentle knowings, in intuitions that pierce through logic, in longings that defy reason, in dreams that will not die. From this place, a new kind of strength is born, not the strength of appearance or reputation, but the strength of rootedness. You begin to walk differently. You begin to speak with more clarity. You begin to say no without guilt, and yes without fear. You begin to live not from reaction, but from alignment, and the world will notice not because you are louder, but because you are truer. There is a gravity to those who have been broken and rebuilt. There is a presence that cannot be faked, because they carry not just knowledge, but wisdom. Not just insight, but embodiment. This transformation does not mean the absence of scars. On the contrary, it is the scars that bear witness to the journey, and they are not shameful. They are sacred. They are the map of your becoming. And so we must move beyond the fear of being broken. We must begin to understand that our brokenness is not a defect. It is an invitation, an opening, a threshold, through which the higher self steps forward and begins to live. And yet, even as the soul rises, the world around us may not understand. The structures that were once familiar may now feel foreign. Old relationships may fall away. Old dreams may dissolve. And in their place, something quieter, but more powerful takes root. Purpose, but not the performative kind of purpose that seeks validation. This is the kind of purpose that flows from your very being. It is not something you do, it is something you are. You become the vessel. The wound that once seemed like your greatest liability now becomes the exact place through which you bring healing to others. It is one of life's greatest paradoxes. The thing that hurt you most deeply may become the very thing that allows you to serve others most powerfully. When you stop hiding your wounds, when you allow yourself to be seen in your entirety, just your victories, but your values. You give others permission to do the same. This is how healing spreads. Not through perfection, but through presence, through authenticity, through one soul saying to another, I've been there, I survived, and now I can walk with you. We must understand that we are not here merely to overcome, we are here to offer. What we carry is not just for us. The wisdom we gain through suffering is meant to be poured out. The insights are meant to be shared. The compassion that pain has carved into us is meant to become medicine, not only for ourselves, but for the world. And so our wounds, once integrated, become portals. Portals to empathy, to understanding, to connection. We stop seeing them as signs of failure and start honoring them as places of power. But this requires a complete reorientation. We must stop asking life to be easy and start asking ourselves who we are becoming. We must stop measuring success by how comfortable we are and begin measuring it by how awake we are. This is the task of the soul. To evolve, to embody, to serve, and every trial, every heartache, every disruption is shaping us for that task. Nothing is wasted, not a single tear, not a single loss. All of it is part of the alchemy. When we accept this, when we embrace the full scope of our humanity, not just the light, but also the shadow, we become whole. And wholeness is what the world needs most. Not more perfection, not more performance, but people who are real. People who have faced the fire and come out not bitter, but burning with purpose. People who know that their suffering has shaped their sacred offering. People who do not just speak of love and truth, but embody it in every word, every choice, every breath. This is the journey we are called to take. Not a journey of avoidance, but of descent. Not a journey of escape, but of integration. We are here to face what others flee, to feel what others numb, to carry what others drop. Not because we are stronger, but because we are willing, because we have been broken, and, in that breaking, have discovered a strength that cannot be taken away. And now, with that strength, with those scars, we begin to walk forward, not as victims of chaos, but as vessels of purpose. The divine disruption has done its work. We are not who we once were, and though the world may not yet see it, we carry within us a fire that cannot be extinguished. It is the fire of a soul that has remembered itself. The fire of a life that has been repurposed. The fire of a calling that cannot be ignored. And it burns not just for ourselves, but for everyone still walking through the fire. Still searching for the light. Still waiting to remember who they are.